Howdy, folks. It's Brian Katulis with the Middle East Institute, host of Taking the Edge Off the Middle East. Thanks for listening to our latest episode here. We'd like you to subscribe, follow, rate, and review. Tell your friends about it. Thanks for joining us in the conversation. This is the podcast where we have a series of casual conversations that offer up rare insider knowledge on the most important events in the Middle East and why it all matters today. Again, I'm Brian Katulis, Senior Fellow here, and today I'm joined by my dear colleague and friend, Mara Rudman, MEI Distinguished Diplomatic Fellow. Mara, welcome to MEI. Let's take some edge off the Middle East. First, let me get this out of the way. We're on video. For those of you watching and listening on video, you'll see I'm wearing a Phillies hat and a shirt. There's a reason for this. We're recording this in early-ish October. The episode won't come out until early November. So it's a leap of faith I'm taking here. My team is still in the playoffs. We'll see where they're at. It's also part of a tradition.
And you're standing with them tonight.
I'm standing with them tonight. They're playing out in Los Angeles against the Dodgers. We'll see what happens. It's do or die for them. If they don't win, they're not in. But the 1980 Phillies were my Phillies when I was growing up. And it's sort of a family tradition. My dad let me stay up to watch that World Series that they won. And our son, Ben, much to the chagrin of my wife, gets to stay up with me at these late night games. So that's why I'm wearing that. And it's a little sort of out of the ordinary, but it's tradition. So thanks. Mara, thanks for being on the program. Let's start where we usually start with a lot of our guests. And I know we're recording in early October, is coming out a few weeks later. A lot can happen, especially in the Middle East. But we're about at the 9-month mark, more or less, of the Trump 2.0 administration. Let's start with the world. How do you think President Trump and his team are handling relations with the rest of the world? And also, how does that interact with what is going on domestically?
So thanks, Brian, and good to be here and good to have the chance to talk with you on some of the stuff. I would say that I don't have a high view in general of how President Trump is handling the rest of the world.
Uh-huh.
That said, I think when we're talking now poised on what may be his biggest achievement and an important one that should be acknowledged, which is getting to a ceasefire between Israelis and Palestinians. And I hope continuing to work the remaining details in that 20-point plan to actually get to a better future for Israelis and Palestinians and the region and the United States. And I think he deserves credit for doing that. I also think, though, that what you can see in that is maybe some, to me, unexpected positives in terms of how the rest of the world is responding to President Trump.
Uh-huh.
And so I think a number of the wins we may be seeing, and certainly the keeping things from getting worse, which is also a big part of working internationally, comes from, for example, with the ceasefire for Gaza, the ways in which I suspect Gulf countries have been putting in a lot of legwork, both in their capitalizing on their relationships with him, building better relationships with each other, and also working with people like former Prime Minister Tony Blair on some of these details, bringing in Muslim leaders as well as the leaders from the Gulf, and knowing how to work President Trump to give him maximum credit for the deal. I think we see some elements of that with some of the European allies as well, in how they have been dealing with him over Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
So I think so it's a mixed picture over the year, and I think that the kind of strength of other countries working together and building alliances, I would hope from an American perspective, in concert with the United States. But I think overall that's better for the world and for international.
Yeah, so it's sort of a team effort, and at some level, at least on the ceasefire, if it's still holding, and if it's moving forward with the bigger 20-point plan he put out in September, it's a team effort, and that the U.S. can't go it alone, and he's pragmatically recognized that. Why are you so negative about the Trump administration, though? Because if this is a sign, the rest of the world, like, what is he not done right, in your view, with relations with the rest of the world?
Well, he's pragmatically recognized that. I think others in the world have managed to build relationships with him that help him to come to that pragmatic recognition.
Yeah. So like Lucy Kurtzer-Ellenbogen, who's a colleague of ours here at MEI, she's on the other one of the other podcasts we had, Middle East Focus, and she talked about how others help Trump, in this case, do the homework.
Yes.
And we're going to get into sort of your vast experience with the Clinton and Obama administrations at very senior positions working on these issues.
Yeah.
That's why we're really lucky to have you here. So he's done this right. What has he not done right in the world 9 months in?
Everything else.
Everything.
No, I think the challenge is the doing the homework, right? I don't think he believes in that. I would put money on the fact that he's never a guy who did his homework when he was a student. All right.
Yeah.
And he has eliminated, trashed or ignored those, many of whom are career folks in the national security establishment and more broadly across government, who would be doing the homework,
right?
Who do not have a political bias, whose job is to bring up to the president the best options. And so that's where my deepest concerns are, from the Pentagon and our uniformed military to civilian employees to the Foreign Service, that the United States is lacking what is the basic foundation for being able to get to the best and most effective national security decision making.
Yeah. So at the end of September, a senior official from another country was in town to do consultations with the government, with the Trump administration on these issues. And Trump had just issued his 20-point plan in a press conference with Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. And this senior official was essentially saying, I don't know who my point person is. And we're going to get into that and what you managed and dealt with in a big way in the Clinton and Obama administrations. So that's something that you think hampers him in the wider world. And it's hard to predict what's going to happen in the Middle East, but you think it potentially could limit the potential of what could be achieved here in Gaza and the broader region, that absence of a coordinated mechanism inside his team.
Yeah, I think it hinders him at home in protecting United States interests and around the world, without question. One just quick example. I got asked the other day, what's Jared Kushner's role?
Right.
And I said, I don't know. And I really do not know. I mean, I think from all reports, he has been an asset in negotiating and getting to this 20-point plan.
Yeah.
But he has no official government title. There is no transparency. You don't know what business deals he's involved in or not involved in in his private capacity. And if he is, in fact, one of the major architects of the plan, I don't know that he is, he does not have a support team behind him to execute. And difficult as it is to get to this incredibly important stage of getting the hostages home, getting humanitarian aid in, and with that, the exchange of Palestinian prisoners, there are so many also critical elements for this agreement to stick and to actually ensure a better future for Israelis and Palestinians, a better, safer, more secure future. And I genuinely do not believe at this point in the United States that we have the capacity to execute on that. So I really hope that the Gulf countries and others who have been involved in putting the details together are planning to be responsible for that.
A team effort. Yeah, sorry, for a team effort. We've talked about this before, and I know you love football analogies, like your husband and things like this. Somebody needs to play that quarterback role, right?
Right.
Who's running play, and usually the U.S. would tip. But you don't see, and I don't see that as well. When I talk to people who are trying to serve in this second administration, there's even for those who are on different files, a lack of clarity for them. Too, and ultimately that can hamper things. So we delved right into the Middle East, and I think that's really great. How do you think Trump is handling the domestic issues and the linkages? There's multiple things going on there. Immigration, things that are connected, that connect domestic policy with international policy, like we talk about. What's his theory of the case and approach there from your view?
I don't know that he has a theory of the case. I think my guess is he's looking at issues in terms of immigration, issues that where he sees or he saw during the campaign many Americans unhappy.
Right.
I think who comes into the country and who can come in, and where long-time citizens of the United States, where and how they're doing on economics themselves. Those things are very intertwined often. And I think he saw some of those connections and thought, I'm going to exploit this, because I think one thing he is a master of is how to divide.
Yeah.
Certainly domestically, and sees tremendous percentage in that. And so as far as I can tell, that's the basic logic of him pursuing the immigration issue as he has. I think the tariff issue is another fascinating one, right? And both of these are, to me, very useful examples of the fact that there is not a line between domestic and international.
Right. Yeah.
There are big challenges the United States has, whether it's on the economic side, on the security side, a blend. And they both show that. So on tariffs, I think he has a fairly old mindset and a fairly simplistic mindset.
Going back like a century, not fairly, like really old, right? Like,
yeah,
we've had tariffs.
Right. And in terms of what tariffs are and how they can be used, and really doesn't want to see the harm side, like to farmers and to many of his other voters, and is... And I think also tied it in his mind to a more protectionist United States, which he also thought would be popular.
Yeah.
So I think that's what he's been pursuing in a very zigzag, haphazard way. I think the other side benefit for him of the tariff point, which I'll just make, and which to me is deeply troubling, is the money that's raised from tariffs goes into basically his personal piggy bank because it doesn't pass through Congress at all, because there's no appropriations process. Mm-hmm. When he talks about how much he's collecting from the American people, by the way, from tariffs, that essentially could become a giant slush fund.
Yeah.
That
and
he has
you're a lawyer, right?
What he wants to.
Yeah, this may not be constitutional because it's being challenged in the Supreme Court.
Right. No, I think, it'll be very interesting. The Supreme Court obviously has a number of big cases coming up, and the tariff one is one of them. There's still other means he could use, because he's been using quite broadly a statute that I will say other presidents also use broadly, but he's taken it to new levels.
And he's also, his trade guy has said that if the Supreme Court rules against them, they're going to use 232 national security provisions to go circumvent that. So basically, on the bigger picture, they're trying to drive something different here in terms of how the U.S. government is funded, and also how we relate with the rest of the world in terms of economic connectivity. And it's an era of globalization that I think has drawn to a close, but it's not ending globalization. It's just rewiring sort of the system, right?
I think it's rewiring. And I think part of what's interesting is, again, it's another example of the rest of the world coming together.
Yeah.
Not necessarily putting up higher barriers for the United States. I think there are concerns that this would end up in a global trade war. And other countries seeing their rational interests more directly.
Yeah.
And so perhaps not responding the way he anticipated. I think eventually this will catch up with him, all of these different things. It will come after much more harm to the American people, but it's partly because he, and there have been presidents of both parties like this, have even recently, who have not wanted to acknowledge to the American people how interconnected the United States is for the rest of the world. Right, so that if you want a better future, if you want good jobs, if you want your kids to have better opportunities than you had, that is more likely if the United States stays maximally connected with friends and partners around the world.
Yeah,
we can't go it alone.
Yeah. So I want to hit the rewind button with you. Thanks for talking about current issues where we are in the fall of 2025. And I want to take you down a trip down memory lane. It's summer of 1999. A young 27-year-old Brian Katulis asks for time on your schedule. Where were you? What was your job at the time?
Summer of 99. Yeah. I believe I had just become the chief of staff at the National Security Council.
What is the National Security Council?
At the White House.
Yeah. What is that? Yeah.
And I think we met before, though. Didn't we meet when you were doing Civic Forum?
Yeah.
For NDI?
You were, sorry, we'll get to that too, that phase when you were on the Hill. But where we really connected was then.
Yes.
And what is the National Security Council at the White House?
The National Security Council staff, which is what we were, and I say that as a stickler because there are a lot of, in the great inflation that's in Washington, there's a lot of people who suggest that they are principals of the National Security Council when actually they're staff.
Yeah.
And so what that entity is meant to be the coordinating body across the government, sits in the White House. It's an entity specifically for the president to both help to coordinate and to advise. And those are to advise the president, to give him the best possible advice. So those can be two competing functions.
Yeah.
But that's what the council is and is meant to do. I should say every president, there's a great deal of flexibility on how the National Security Council is structured, how many staff you have, how you organize it. Whereas the other state, defense, treasury, those are all set by statute.
Yeah.
National Security Council, every president can get the National Security Council he wants and or I would argue he deserves by the attention that he gives or doesn't give to how it's set up.
Yeah. So the reason why I remember that as like a vivid point is that you were so busy, but you were so kind after the end of a very long day. I was a graduate fellow basically for Bruce Rideout and Rob Malley, Ken Pollack, who's here at MEI with us, Gina Abercrombie, Wynn Stanley, Dom Camp. I was in this...
and that was when your directorate was Near East and South Asia.
Yeah, yep. 7 people covering the territory of the world from Morocco to India, right? Imagine this and everything that was happening. And that just sort of exploded in a big way under W. Bush and Clinton. And you were giving me... We connected at that moment. I know we connected in the West Bank when I worked at the National Democratic Institute on Multaka Medani Civic Forum, and you were, I think, a House staffer for Lee Hamilton. So we have deep roots going back, 30 plus years. But it was that moment that stuck with me because you were super busy and you were super kind. And this is a lesson for the young folks who are out there. Don't be bashful about asking very busy people for their time. Because I remember walking from the Eisenhower building where our directorate was. And where was your office?
My office was in the West Wing.
Yeah.
On the entry level, so like the basement level, floor beneath where the National Security Advisor and the first deputy.
Yeah.
My role is like second deputy, which we can get to. But my office at that point was in the space that was originally the National Security Advisor's office when Henry Kissinger was the National Security Advisor.
Yeah.
I have a unique distinction that both office space that I occupied at the White House has been turned into Situation Rooms. Yeah. So the office no longer exists where the ultra classified meetings are. Yeah. But it was a great office.
Yeah. And you spent some time with me and gave me advice, and then we struck up a professional relationship and a friendship there. So tell us a little bit about what it's like to run that body and with Sandy Berger. And if people don't remember, Sandy was Clinton's second national security advisor. I thought he was brilliant at toggling and marrying sort of smart policy with politics and looking at things through different angles. But then it plays this role in terms of process. Let's talk about the process in an ideal situation, which may not, as we discussed, may not be happening under the Trump administration.
Sure. Well, I would say my role in the chief of staff space was to maximize. I saw it as to maximize the ability for the National Security Advisor and for quite a long while, the chief deputy, who was Jim Steinberg at the time, to focus on only on the things that only they could do. And for me to be able to maximally clear out the underbrush.
Yeah.
So both in process and in policy terms, to take the lower hanging fruit and leave the things that because there's only 24 hours in a day, and all of us there are already up for most of those hours, right? And the other thing I felt it was part of my role, and Sandy looked at it this way, was to maximize a fair process. Mm-hmm. So to ensure that we were getting briefing papers out to all of the other agencies who are going to be in deputies meetings and principals meetings being those that were chaired by Sandy Berger, deputies by Jim Steinberg, sometimes by me. Former SecDef Jim Mattis was the exec sec at the Pentagon when I was...
So he's your counterpart over at the Pentagon?
Kind of. I mean, he was the person who would call and very nicely say, are you guys ever going to get us these papers? Because I would like my people to be prepared for these meetings. And
right.
And he would say, like, you really got to get to a system that gets us out more in advance and gives us time to really be able to reflect. But some of what and I would say the one other process thing that Sandy did that hasn't been followed by subsequent administrations, which I think is unfortunate, is he made my role, the chief budget person at the NSC. Uh-huh. And so for President Clinton, this may seem odd now, but getting to a balanced budget was really important. There was a meeting every morning that was chaired by John Podesta, the then White House chief of staff, that was only on the budget.
Yeah.
And I was the person who went for the NSC there.
Yeah.
I worked very closely with the Office of Management and Budget. And what that meant, though, is that since I was in every deputies meeting and every principals meeting, there was always, and usually with someone from Office of Management and Budget, there was the ability to say, how are we going to pay for this?
Yeah.
Or what are we going to trade off, this versus that? And that is generally, historically, not a strength of the national security community.
Yeah. And this is important. This is the nuts and bolts of how you get things done in an organized fashion, right? Like, even though it may sound bureaucratic, I wanted to walk through that a little bit because sometimes, certainly it sounds like it's a lost art. Like you said, subsequent administrations didn't follow this. What was Sandy like to work with? And I'll tell you a story too, but I want to hear what you think.
So he was a terrific boss. I've been very fortunate, particularly in the first half of my career, I would say roughly first half, to have worked with some amazing bosses.
Yeah.
Without whom my entire career trajectory and the way I approach a lot of things would have been very different. Sandy was warm and engaging, and he had a sense of humor. And as he told me more than once, he wanted people who push back. He thought I enjoyed it a little too much.
Oh, do you know there's a verb for your name, for you as a person? Do you know this? I wanted to tell you this. So you know Laura Loomer?
Yes.
People have been Loomered. What does that mean?
It means being like thrown out unfairly. So it better not be the same.
Yeah. Marad is that you don't suffer fools at all. And one person described me as a young woman who is impervious to bullshit. And I know you well enough. You have no poker face, right? And another person said in that moment, because we'll get into the Middle East stuff in a little bit, that you basically, whether it's Israeli or Palestinian, you took glee when they were wrong. And not mean, but like you're a stickler for facts, right? And not a chameleon and not shape-shifting. And this is what Sandy also did, was demanded that people have different views, right?
Yes. Yeah, I would say not took glee exactly, but I will say, it does go to some of process and making sure a variety of views are presented. So there are several situations where Sandy, and hard to imagine in the current environment, right? Well, Sandy put me in front of the president to make arguments that he knew the president wasn't going to want to hear.
Yeah.
But was important for the president to understand and process as he got to his decision.
Yeah.
And that's where he made the comment to me about, I know we need to do this. I know you are the person to do this. I wish you wouldn't enjoy it so much.
Yeah.
Which wasn't,
Yeah. So I think I broke news here that there's a verb, but it's meant in a positive way, that you were really tough with the facts and that you can't allow people to sort of shapeshift and call shit on people. So
yeah, and I think I probably
ruffled some feathers there, or no?
Well, I think it's just, and particularly with people on my side, with other Americans, like the idea that you would be anything but straightforward when you're briefing the president of the United States, and having U.S. interests central. So I would consider it part of my role to make sure that if people were being less than straight or obfuscating in some ways, that got...
Or trying to do end runs around the system.
Totally on the trying to do end runs around the system.
Any good examples of that you want to talk
about?
Yeah. Or no? What?
So I'm trying to remember what point this happened. There's obviously lots of back and forth and paperwork in the intensity of President Clinton trying up to the very last second to get to the peace deal between Israelis and Palestinians.
At Camp David in 2000.
In
the run-up to it.
I actually heard Elliot Abrams talk about Camp David. It's actually post-Camp David. Camp David is not a great example. It's really December, key meetings with Arafat and Israelis in December of 2000, and then literally up through the kind of closing days.
So Taba, all of these things that were
maybe pre-Taba, but after Camp David. It's such a historical fallacy to talk about, because there's a lot that went wrong in process at Camp David.
Yeah.
And people would have varied different views about whether it should have happened then, but give a lot of credit to the work that was done through the fall of 2000.
Yeah.
But so at any rate, for the entire time I was at the NSC, which was roughly the last 3 years of President Clinton's administration, second administration, there is a lot of Middle East related stuff.
Yeah. He said this is a way to burnish his legacy in a sense, right? A bit. You disagree with that?
I think it's because he really thought it was the right thing to do and important. And I think that President Clinton, and I'll come back to the story on paperwork.
Yeah.
I think President Clinton was particularly impacted by his relationship with Yitzhak Rabin and with King Hussein and with Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
And I saw not only in how he interacted with them, but because I wasn't there to observe his interactions with Prime Minister Rabin, but in how he spoke about it after. I didn't view it as his legacy. I viewed it as he felt an obligation to these people he saw as great and courageous leaders,
right,
to be maximizing every effort.
Yeah.
So on the paperwork story, that was the more mundane from the high flying. A person to be unnamed who was part of your directorate, probably more than one, was pushing through a number of packages, right, of paper that has to go up to the National Security Advisor for review, to go up to the president.
Yeah.
And because, a little bit to my chagrin, a lot of the Middle East peace process work didn't go through the deputies' meetings, normal process where, frankly, which is important because then every agency with equity gets a chance to share their views. The president's going to decide whatever he's going to decide.
Yeah.
They managed to, for reasons we can or go into, largely avoid those meetings.
Yeah.
But the paperwork still needed to circulate. Every paper that is part of national security decision making goes to the archives eventually. You know, it's paper of record. It's got numbers. It's got classification notices. Right. And your directorate was particularly notable.
You're not blaming me, are you?
For sending in, I'm just putting it as the group, sending forward paper that would say at the top, out of the system.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
In capital letters.
Did Kathy Cooper know this?
And my guess is it was like late at night. They somehow avoided Kathy, but I would commiserate with Kathy Cooper about it, right? And I would say there is no out of system. There's no such thing.
They made it up.
Right. And so this is how it's going to be changed if you want this to actually go to the people who have to review it and make the decisions.
Yeah.
And it was like far enough along in the administration. I was like, come on, you guys.
You know this better. Yeah. So, well, it's an important and concrete example of how you get process done and then people try to work around it. And do you think it affected the outcome on the policy itself? Or
yes,
it did.
I think that, listen, it was for a variety of different reasons. It was a tough. It was going to be a tough road, regardless.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good example of the fact that good process doesn't guarantee good outcomes, but bad process or lack of process really heightens the odds for bad policy.
And that's outcomes. I think today in 2025, moving forward, especially with the Gaza ceasefire and the hopes for going to, the big, beautiful, whatever normalization and other things, if you don't have those things in place.
Right.
And that's quite the contrast. Before we move on, I want to talk a little bit more about more recent things. One thing I'd say about Sandy, because you and I, Sandy Berger, are part of the Mutual Appreciation Fan Club. And I can't believe it's been 10 years since we lost him. It's coming. Like, I think my life is in a particle accelerator the last few years. It's like time flies. And not only was he a stickler for detail, he was a lawyer as well, but I think he's an underappreciated strategic thinker in the ranks, right? We had earlier this summer on the podcast, Ed Luce has a terrific book on Zbig Brzezinski. And I think for whatever reason, Sandy is viewed in a particular way. But my story about him comes from later in his life and even in his final year, when he was mostly at a business firm, but spent most of his time and energy on the toughest problems.
Yep.
And it would have been 2014 to 15 when I was working with him. I was at the Center for American Progress, but I work all the time, and I was working on side things with him. And he was so passionate about Syria.
Yeah.
He thought, he can't speak for himself now, but he thought that the Obama team at that time was so misguided, but he would never go out and rubbish them because a lot of the people, and there was just respect, but he would make his views known in many different channels, including on a flight on Air Force One with President Obama in early 2015. He was very passionate about it. He often brought with him the models from Ending Wars in the former Yugoslavia.
Mm-hmm.
Like he knew what he knew.
Yeah.
And he thought, well, you can marry sort of the institutions,
Yeah.
processes together. And he was equally passionate, I assume, when you worked with him on these issues, right?
Yeah. 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 No, he was very intense. I do think he was a great strategic thinker. I think and he worked nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, though, among the things I really appreciated about him, though, is that amidst all that, he was also capable of laughing at himself and acknowledging when he was wrong, or clearly knew when, because he pushed himself so hard, he pushed the people around him very hard also. And he was, he felt badly when, if you called him on it, and he knew he needed to do something about it, and he would go and apologize. And he also did something that I haven't had bosses do, I think, before or after. And it wasn't at expected times. He sent handwritten notes at various points to, I think, almost everyone on the staff. Never all at one time, but that he noticed a moment, and maybe it was a time when you particularly needed it.
Yeah.
And you'd look, and there was this index card with a note from Sandy in your inbox, which for younger people now, the idea of a handwritten note at all may seem odd.
Yeah.
But it really made a difference. And the other thing, and I don't think he did it just with me, maybe because my face was so readable and stuff. There are various points where he'd say, "Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing?"
Yeah. Yeah.
He did the checking in.
Human touch. And that was, and he also, the other thing, I'm sorry, before we get off it.
Yeah.
I remember that summer, Bill Clinton's birthday. I forget when President Clinton's birthday. They had a birthday party for him he had a sense of humor. So he dressed up Sandy Berger. I have a picture of it. I have evidence of this as Jesse the Body Ventura, the former WWE wrestler, and he was in a feather boa and did some sort of shtick in front of the whole staff. Yeah. So even though he was a very serious man, and a strategic thinker, he was human. Yeah, and we miss him very much.
Yes, and I will just say, on those who want to have a window into his strategic thinking, because he didn't write a book.
Yeah,
I would highly recommend the Miller Center at University of Virginia that does the presidential studies project. So in the project on President Clinton, Sandy spent a great deal of time with them, and there's an incredibly thoughtful transcript that, if you're you or me, really transports you back to that time.
Yeah.
But you can see him lay out the whole trajectory. He was Deputy National Security Advisor for the first term, and then National Security Advisor for the second term.
Yeah.
And I think that there's no better read on what President Clinton, other than maybe President Clinton's book, but I actually think Sandy's interview is better. So I really recommend people go look at that.
So we took a trip down memory lane. I want to move forward now and talk about, so that era we were talking about, the late 1990s, was a much different geopolitical and political era in the United States. And the questions of how you built political support for your foreign policy agenda. And the Clinton administration, I also think, did a lot of big things, and often those who left it did not then sell sort of the accomplishments of things that I think personally were quite good. NATO expansion, a lot of the things that were done in the Middle East, though not complete, it was moving things forward, I think, in a positive way. What happened in those last 25 years in terms of politics and political support? Like, here we are today. We're recording this at a time of yet another government shutdown. There's so much discord. And how do we lose sense of sort of the bigger picture, and what's the best formula? What happened over the last 20, 25 years? I have my arguments for it, but what's the best formula for actually producing smarter policy with political support?
Yeah. Well, I think part of what happened are forces outside of, but adjacent to politics, right? Some of the deep partisan divides definitely, I was going to say, started in the Clinton administration. I'm sure that they existed beforehand, but the extent of ongoing investigations against the executive branch, I mean, people forget this, I think, right? He was obviously impeached by the House that prevailed in the trial in the Senate. But there were very deep divisions. I think that social media and the roles of social media, and which is in the last 15 years, maybe, has really played on what may be divides out there. And the fact that we are in a 24/7 frenetic media culture where people can't agree on what facts are.
Yeah.
I think all of those things have contributed mightily. And so if you look at how do we get back, I think in some ways there are lessons from President Clinton's time, even though it was different. For example, he brought bipartisan delegations of members of Congress with him on every international trip.
Oh, wow. Can you imagine?
Every single one. And I was, and I staffed a couple of them. In Bosnia, we were the landing in Sarajevo when it was possible to do that. I believe this is right. But it was a trip that had Bob Dole on it. Shortly after he had
the Republican leader,
Republican leader, but who had been the Republican candidate who against President Clinton
in 1996.
In 1996. So imagine this was in 1997.
Yeah,
and he was invited Bob Dole, who came with him.
Yeah,
leading the congressional delegation. And I've got to say, from my perspective, staffing this, it was like 3 weeks after I had started at the NSC, and I was staffing this group of the congressional delegation. Thank God that Bob Dole was on it, because he was both a very helpful humor factor, and he also kept the other members in line. So if you're members of Congress traveling with the president, you're on his schedule, not yours. You have to wait in different places, and they can be pretty grumpy about it.
Right.
And Bob Dole was always the one who snapped them into line and kind of embarrassed them, but in good ways. So having those opportunities, though, for a president of the United States to engage, because there was always at least 1 or 2 meetings a day that was with that delegation, and you could shape their schedule in these countries that they were in, so that you're being able to share a story of how your administration is seeing issues, and then giving the opportunity for back and forth.
Yeah.
I think it's a tremendous resource and opportunity, and I don't think that presidents since have used it in the same way.
Yeah. One other thing he did, and somebody I was talking with about you earlier today reminded me of this, he brought a Republican into his cabinet in the second term in the Defense Department. And this person characterized this as like, I think nobody really wanted this to happen except President Clinton. But they were talking about you and how you work really well. And it was actually a key part of the pragmatic approach to very tough issues. Like, there's the partisanship and the ideology, and we're so far away from that.
Yeah.
But so I'd forgotten he'd done these delegations like that with, and that's amazing when you think about it. It's sad for me to say, but I think it's impossible to imagine. But we'll see if Trump, goes on a foreign trip and brings, because they're not even talking right now about the government shutdown,
right?
Democrats and vice versa.
And I'll say again, so that this goes back to Sandy. The other thing that we did was, and this was in the time period leading up to impeachment, which was when we also had the bombing, the bombings in Sudan and Kenya. Yeah. The actions there, right? And then what the United States was going to do.
Oh, I see.
Right. And Sandy in that period initiated, and I went with him some of the time, direct briefings with the 4 leaders, the Democratic leader and the Republican leaders in the Senate, the Speaker in the House, who was Newt Gingrich at the time, and the Democratic leader. They would not meet with each other in a room. They would meet with him. And the other thing is, he didn't insist that they come to him. He went to Capitol Hill and he met with them individually, and he was doing it every week throughout that fall.
Yeah.
So the kind of, no matter how partisan people are being around you, you're separating national security issues from that and continuing to execute. It included, by the way, also bringing a delegation to Israel and the West Bank and Gaza in the week before there's going to be an impeachment vote in the House.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So I think some of it is, you can say, yes, it would be impossible today. Things that seem impossible may be possible if people actually come together to see that their interests are going to be shared by moving forward in that way. So I would not want to write it off.
I don't, that, and we talk about trying to rebuild the vital center. I think the politics of national security these days, especially on a lot of Middle East issues, isn't always Republican versus Democrat. It's more clowns to the left and me jokers to the right. And there's a huge when you look at get out of the bubble.
Yeah.
And the bubble is very dysfunctional with elites not talking to each other. But you get out like I do a couple times a month and speak at World Affairs Councils. And you have people from different partisan stripes that vote for a Republican or Democrat, but they know that it's better for us to be as unified as possible when we approach the world, because our adversaries and competitors try to exploit those divisions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and also because, again, having friendships and relationships around the world is what allows farmers to sell at reasonable prices and get goods out and have normal trade relationships and have family farms survive. It is what allows the United States to be able to have car factories in our country that also are foreign car manufacturers and have workers from a variety of places. And ultimately, that leads to better jobs for more people in more places around the country. And that comes from people within the United States working better together, even across difference.
Yeah.
And that same thing applies internationally.
Well, we can only hope we can get back to that model and people support that sort of thing. Let's delve more into your experience on Middle East policy. I sort of glossed over a bit in the introduction, but you went back into the administration under the Obama administration. Briefly, you were at the National Security Council, if I recall. We worked together at the Center for American Progress, and then you were gone. Like, they scooped up all the talent that they had there and left me behind. But then you worked with Senator George Mitchell, who was the Middle East peace envoy, but you were his deputy in that first term, and then second, you worked on Middle East policy, the top Middle East policy person at USAID. When you think back on these periods, what we talked about before in the 1990s and then in the 2010s, essentially, I mean, you went into 2009, what would you say on the Middle East were the biggest success stories that you were a part of in advancing U.S. interests in the region? What were those, like, what is there one standout thing? I know it's hard to find these days a clean win and a clear win, but is there something that's memorable for you that stands out?
Well, I think what's memorable and what could have been a win if the United States and others had more follow through was what I think you talked with Elliot Abrams about on the podcast with him, that he and I disagree on a lot of stuff. Right. One area that we agree, though, is on the impressiveness of Salam Fayyad, who was initially, I believe, came in during the Bush administration as finance minister. I'm not sure if he was prime minister by the end of George W. Bush's administration. But when Obama came in, he was in the prime minister role. I worked very closely with him, along with the Israeli military person who occupies what's called the Coordinator of Government Affairs in the Territories, COGAT role. And so for most of my time working with George Mitchell as one of his deputies, I did less of the negotiating peace stuff and more of the being on the ground in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, all over the West Bank, not in Gaza at that point when I was in government, but dealing with how to maximize the institution building work of the Palestinian Authority, which had real potential with Salam Fayyad as prime minister. Obviously, Mahmoud Abbas was the president then, as he is now. And Netanyahu, for almost all the time I was in that role, was prime minister. Ehud Olmert was prime minister for a little while when we first got done on the Israeli side. But the Palestinian institution building work, which is so hard to imagine as a success now because it's been almost entirely demolished, that was the golden period of it. And I thought in that case, Secretary Clinton deserved a lot of credit for giving me the ability to be on the ground and being able to give maximum support to Prime Minister Fayyad, giving me a lot of leeway in how I was able to work also with the COGAT, the Israeli COGAT. And I worked with 2 or 3 of them in that time period and found them all very impressive and frankly learned through that just how many conversations that the Israelis and Palestinians were having with one another.
On practical issues.
On practical issues that were much more under the radar, even as you saw in headlines, just the opposite.
Yeah.
But on issues like water and electricity, things that make a difference in people's daily lives, being able to build schools and health clinics in parts of the West Bank that Palestinians did not control, and throughout Gaza.
Yeah.
That cooperation between them was critical, and the ability as an American to go in and speak with them and then be able to put our money where our mouth was in following through to support. I do view that as quite significant, and I think it's incredibly sad And I think there's responsibility in multiple places for the fact that did not fall through. I'd also give Prime Minister Blair a lot of credit. He was the quartet representative at the time and very much shared that vision of a bottom-up approach.
Yeah. So, and I was going to do the typical think tank or media in these days question, why did it fail and why didn't it succeed? But now I have a different question. From that experience, which you see as a success story in its own right, though never came to full fruition, what's the lesson you learn going forward? If heaven... I hope we have to this war and we're moving forward to something akin to what Trump or others have put out about a broader vision. There's got to be some lessons learned because the Palestinians, in my view, aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
They're part of the land and people, and they want their own dignity and self-governance. Right. What's the key lesson for U.S. policy and international policymakers?
So I would say it is... something I tried to pass along. I only served in President Obama's first term. I was at the White House and the State Department, and then roughly 2 years at USAID running the Middle East and carrying, because of Secretary Clinton, continuing to carry the Palestinian Institution Building coordinating role, which was unusual for someone at AID in my role. And when I briefed the incoming team at State who was going to be handling these issues, and it was a very sensitive time in terms of Prime Minister Fayyad and how frustrated he was.
2013 or something?
Spring of 2013. And early spring of 2013. And I could tell they were getting bored by what I was talking about with these schools and clinics and water and electricity. And they said to me, "You have to understand, Mara, Secretary Kerry thinks big. And he's not interested in all of this. Like, this is like small ball stuff."
Yeah.
And I said, "He's Secretary of State. That's totally his prerogative. One of you guys," and there were like 4 of them in the room. I was like, "One of you has to be the details guy."
Right.
Because he gets to think big, but if you don't have like the foundation built up and people have to trust you that you're going to deliver on what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
So that would be my takeaway. And that's my biggest concern on this 20-point plan. And that's why I'm hoping that Tony Blair and some of those from the Gulf have been working on this. I know Blair is capable of being a detailed people or getting detailed folks around him.
Right, yeah.
That they have in mind how you do this implementation.
Yeah.
And that they've got enough agreement with President Trump to have basically a significant runway past this immediate stuff to hold his attention.
Yeah.
And to continue to have U.S. support for the detail work, even if the United States is not doing it.
Yeah, you need an operational plan and someone who's orchestrating that and things like this.
And I'd say one other thing, though, from President Clinton's time, less about the details and more how much personal relationships matter and having people trust you.
Yeah.
And putting in the time so people trust you. So I referenced before what I thought was his commitment to honoring the memory of Prime Minister Rabin. Mm-hmm. But I also found it astounding when I would spend a lot of time in Israel during President Obama's administration, and Israelis were not, for the most part, not happy at all with President Obama. I thought much of it was unfair. And there was a period where I would carry with me a card that had on one side the things that President Clinton had asked of the Israelis and expected of them, and the things that President Obama was saying and doing, and I had intimate knowledge of both. President Obama was putting much less on the Israeli side than President Clinton did in terms of expectations. Wow. And I would read down the list and wait for them. It was at Shabbat dinners with different people. I was a fun guest, I'm sure. And people would have a hard time accepting, but I had the facts of both. And then what they would finally come around to is, but we knew President Clinton loved us. We knew he cared about us.
They had it in his guts.
It was the personal, it was his ability to convey, which also I think was one of his very special talents.
Still is.
As a leader, right? The direct, someone once said he can be speaking to a crowd of 1,000 people and have each one feel like he's speaking directly to them.
Yeah. Before this podcast, I did a podcast, one episode on the main Middle East focus one a couple of years ago with Itamar Rabinovich. And it was right before October 7th. It was the summer of 23. You could look it up at Middle East Focus. And he had a book out. And I asked him, what do you think is different today? And he said leadership and the dearth of leadership across the region, but here as well. And we were talking back in 2023, but the connectivity between those leaders, right? And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because President Clinton had it with not only Rabin, but with King Hussein of Jordan at the time, with multiple leaders, right?
And he also ended up building it or creating it with the people of those countries.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, listen, he would often tell you, and he may still, that he polled better in both among Palestinians and Israelis than either of their leaders did.
He's the only U.S. president to go to Gaza.
Yeah,
right?
I went with him to Gaza.
You went to, what was that like?
Well, so this was when I was taking I was in charge of the congressional delegation.
Yeah. But what's that like? It's hard.
Well, I had been in Gaza several times before, so this is why I'm bringing it up this way, because I know that the members of Congress thought like, because part of my deal with the congressional delegation that the White House agreed to is that if they were on the trip, they had to do all parts of the trip. So Israel, West Bank, and Gaza.
Yeah.
And then it's like incredible because you get to show them stuff.
Yeah.
And so
it was bipartisan?
Yes.
Okay.
And so it would come up in our conversations in various places that it became pretty clear I'd been there before. And so they were definitely wondering how this person who at that time was the legislative director at the NSC had been to Gaza multiple times. Yeah. And it got worse because when we were there, I ran into at one point Jabil Rajoub, who was the leader then of one of the security forces. Yeah. And so he was in Gaza and he sees me, and I had met with him previous times when I'd been a Hill staffer and other things. Yeah. And he was clearly surprised to see me there and came up and said, like, who are you working for? And we can all, Jabil Rajoub may have worked for multiple parties.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I said, the White House, the president.
Yeah.
So it was incredible to see Gaza at that point. And I had for a long time a poster from President Clinton landing. I think he took a helicopter landed in or near Gaza City. And the poster said, "Welcome to Palestine, Mr. President."
Amazing. So, and I also heard he gave an extemporaneous speech. I don't know if you told me this, but nobody has the text of it. And how he spoke to the Palestinian people.
National Council.
Yeah. But no, I can't find it. And if anyone out there who's listening to this can find it, because I heard it was... I think extemporaneous, and he was brilliant at this.
Well, I remember him changing whatever this direction of the speech was. And again, it's hard to remember now, but that was his agreement with Arafat because they needed to renounce in their basic charter violence against Israel.
Yeah.
And so his agreement was if they did that, he would speak at the PNC, the Palestinian National Council meeting in Gaza. And he did, and there was a vote that happened. He also then went to speak at the Knesset the next day, I think, or the day after. And so similarly, like won over people who, with a message that was very consistent with all sides.
Yeah. So 30 plus years involvement in U.S. policy inside and outside of government. What's the most memorable meeting or leader that you met? Hard, I know.
Yeah.
It's hard to pick it out. What came to mind? What was the first thing?
Not for his name or stature in the world, but for how he operated, I'd say Salam Fayyad. And I appreciated Tony Blair for similar reasons.
Yeah.
But I would say to me what was more memorable than the leaders themselves is the people behind them who no one knows.
Oh, yeah.
Who you have to if you can get part of my lesson from President Clinton, right, is the human angle on things. And if you can establish, and you could pretty quickly go into a room and figure out who you could work with and who you couldn't.
Right.
And establish relationships at that level. That's the single most important thing you can do to help your principal get to the policy objectives they want.
Need those relationships. Yeah.
And it also makes me feel better about the world that there are so many people out there, as there are were in our own government, who are committed to making things better for the people around them.
So running out of time, I want to close out where we close with all our guests. The spark that got you into this, getting to know you a little bit and things like this. Let me throw you one question. I think I saw it myself, but multiple people told me you had a picture of children from Haiti in your office. Tell us about that.
So, it was 3 young boys, and I often wonder what happened to them. It was a trip I took to Haiti for election observation during the time, I think, immediately Aristide was there, gone.
95, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know who you talked to because there's someone I went on that trip with. So it was Dan Restrepo traveled with me, who went on to be senior director for Western hemispheres at the National Security Council under
where?
President Obama.
Where?
Dan, I used to joke, was like the pool boy who then came to be a staffer we were his first job out of college, at the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which was
Lee Hamilton.
chaired by Lee Hamilton.
As an intern. Who did Dan have as an intern?
Dennis McDonough,
who became President Obama's chief of staff.
Right. And
so for all of you listening out there, if you're in like a internship, someday you could become the boss of your bosses at that, right?
Yeah. Well, and so Dan and I went to Haiti election observation. We're in desperately poor. Much of Port-au-Prince is. We're in a particularly poor area where people were voting.
Yeah.
And so there are these three boys who were fairly malnourished, clearly good friends with each other, in very worn clothes like rags, and they were following us around and asking us about what we were doing there and how. And so we spoke with them some, and I think then they asked for their picture to get taken. And I actually also tried, this was again before iPhones, tried ways to get the picture to them. I think the address, I'm not sure if they had a home, but I carried that with me in office after office. And I actually had a picture of a bunch of girls in Gaza also, on the edge of a big water pit of unhealthy, unsanitized water, which had been improved pre this latest conflict. And first of all, I love kids.
Yeah.
I love having conversations with kids wherever you are, and that's where it helps actually to have, whether or not I know the language, to have an expressive face.
Yeah.
Because you can feel like you can connect.
No, you don't need to excuse that. That's cool.
And so for me, it was a reminder of why I was doing the work I was doing, to make things better for the kids in our country and for kids around the world.
Yeah, that's great. And it's when I heard about this, and multiple people said this, I think we often forget in our field, foreign policy, national security, whatever you call it, that these are people's lives.
Yeah.
And having that connection and reminding while you're in a busy policy job, whether you're on the Hill or in administration, trying to make deals and peace deals, this is going to affect people's lives day in and day out. What was the spark that got you into this field and this vocation and career you've chosen for yourself?
Yeah.
What inspired you?
I think probably my dad.
You were an Air Force brat, I understand.
Army.
Oh.
My dad was an Army doctor.
Though
the only overseas station we had was in Panama on the Canal Zone, which is where my younger brother was born.
Oh wow.
And then we moved back to this area, and he left actually 10 years into his Army career because and again, this will date me, but because doctors with families were being sent to Vietnam. And he, at that point, so he was, well into a career, more than halfway, but decided he didn't want to risk that with his family. And I think he had big questions about Vietnam.
Yeah. But his commitment to public service, like, what was it about?
It was, I don't know if it's public service as much as like asking tough questions and being comfortable.
That's what you do.
Being comfortable with that and engaging. So from the time I was a little kid, I remember dinner table conversations. I mean, he read all the Watergate books, but I also knew the phrase, don't buy books from crooks. So he would take out of the library the books by Haldeman and Ehrlichman, and somehow John Dean Blind Ambition he would buy.
Oh, wow.
So he had and Jeb Magruder's book he would buy.
Yeah.
But those kinds of discussions, he, had us watch the Watergate hearings in the middle. So we were young kids. And there's always those discussions and always asking the hard questions, even though I didn't travel internationally until I was in college. And he died when I was 17 and died suddenly. But I feel like that's what kind of lit the flame of being curious and being curious about the world.
What about the Middle East? How did you get involved in that?
So the Middle East was really, well, first high school youth group. I was in Reformed Jewish youth group, and so I to some extent Israel and things related to Israel, and I also grew up in a Reformed Jewish congregation. So it was always in the mix there. And then I went to Dartmouth and took several courses with Ian Lustig.
Oh yeah.
And ended up doing
Penn now.
Yes, yeah. I think just retired from it. Ended up doing my thesis with him, and really got the bug through that. And I will say, so so Ian Lustig was also someone who asks tough questions and expects kind of high quality responses. I don't agree with him on a fair amount at this point.
Yeah.
But I so appreciate the toolage I got from him. And I'm thinking of that just because I'd mentioned Elliot Abrams a couple times.
Yeah.
I have similar views about Elliot,
yeah.
who was never a teacher of mine, but I learned a lot from him over the years. I did the transition from the Bush administration to the Obama administration for the Obama team, and Elliot was my counterpart at the White House. And I gained tremendous respect for him and how he operated. And so to me, I feel very fortunate that I've had a number of people, Democrats and Republicans, and a wide range of views that have helped me to learn more.
One person I want to mention, I think was influential, was Congressman Lee Hamilton as well.
Yeah.
You worked with him for how many years? And tell me about why he mattered to you.
So I worked with him for 5 years. I would say Lee Hamilton and Larry Eagleburger and Sandy Berger, if I had to point to like three people.
Who's Larry Eagleburger? Tell us all.
Larry Eagleburger was a career Foreign Service officer who I believe was the first career Foreign Service officer to become Secretary of State when James Baker went to the White House.
Yeah.
And I didn't work with him at all when he was in government. I worked with him because he was chairman of something called the International Commission on Holocaust-Era Insurance Claims. And he needed someone to run stuff for him, and they're having a certain amount of difficulty, and I came in 2 years in and became essentially his COO. So got to work with him during that time. Lee Hamilton, so I knew of Lee Hamilton before I worked for him. I was working for my hometown congressman, Gary Studs, who was on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And that office used to give me a hard time because I was in charge of interns there. And when interns were interviewing for jobs other places on the Hill, when we'd like murder board questions, and they'd, if they asked, and I would always say, if you're asked who you most respect on Capitol Hill, say Lee Hamilton, which got noticed because I wasn't working in Lee Hamilton's office. And he was like the one person that never fell off my my pedestal, my hero pedestal. So it really was such an honor to get to work for him and to learn from him. He's still probably, it's hard to pick among, again, because I was fortunate, but I think he was the best teacher that I could have had for how Washington ought to work.
You got to put policy and your case together first before you do the politics was one thing, right?
Well, you've got to understand the politics at the same time.
Yeah.
But when people would say, well, we can't do X or Y because this won't work for these reasons, he'd say, tell me what the right thing to do is.
Yeah.
And then let's figure out the pathway there.
That's it. Yeah.
But don't,
That's what I learned from you as well. Last question. We got to close. If someone wants to follow in your footsteps, someone who's out there listening to this in college or wants to have the terrific career that you've had, what would you say they need to do today in 2025?
So I never had a career plan.
So don't have a plan. Yeah, just get there.
But I think that what I was fortunate to get support for was being curious, and asking the hard questions.
Yeah.
And working hard, knowing I would suggest people make sure you do your homework.
Yeah.
President Trump included would be nice.
Yeah.
But do your homework, have a sense of what facts are, at least in this day and age, a variety of different perspectives.
Yeah.
Spend time talking to people with whom you disagree so you can learn something. And then for me, it was about finding people who are good teachers and not necessarily looking that I wanted their job. I wanted to learn how to maximize their ability to be successful in their job.
Right.
And asking hard questions along the way, and then, hoping that leads to the next interesting thing to do.
That's great. Well, thanks for that advice. I'm really glad in the 90s we met out in the West Bank. Really thankful that you took time out of your busy schedule back in 1999 to talk to a young Brian Katulis, and super happy that we've stayed connected all these years and worked together, and look forward to working together. Again, Mara Rudman, thanks for coming on Taking Edge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to have you.
Good talking to you.
That's all the time we have for this week. Again, thanks to our listeners for tuning in and to our colleagues for their work on the show. You can follow MEI on X, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and perhaps sometime soon TikTok, I don't know. And subscribe to our email newsletters for the latest analysis and information about upcoming events. I'm Brian Katulis. We'll see you all soon.